Hi everybody, in this demo we're going to go ahead and we're going to set up a local repository that you can use that's going to include the Ausimart sample application. Now this can be helpful because then you can have your own version of the sample code that you can make changes to. But just to get started, we're only going to do this locally, so do make sure that you've already got Git installed on your computer, or if you're using some other server as your workstation or something like that, make sure you've got Git installed there ready to go. Now we have spoken about the fact that the very first thing you're going to want to do before you start working with Git is perform some configuration tasks. So I'll just expand that for better visibility and let's go ahead and perform those tasks now. I'm going to type in git config. I'm going to make these changes global, which remember will mean for any repository that I am working on the computer I am currently logged into. I could actually type local if I wanted that to apply to an individual repository that I'm currently in, or I could even type that to system if I wanted this to apply to all users on my computer. So we'll stick with global. We're going to go ahead and set the username first. That's user.name, and I'm going to set that as my sample account, Mike Smith. Okay, so that's the first setting we want to configure, but we also want to configure another one here, global user.email. Now remember, these two things are really important from a Git perspective because Git is all based on version control, and that's important to understand who was making what changes. So you need these details so that when you make those changes and when you commit your changes, there's a record of what actually took place. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in my sample account here, msmith.ausimart@gmail.com. Now, of course, you'll need to enter in your own details that correspond with your own email address, and it is best to use an email address here that you would be happy to use setting up things like GitHub, Bitbucket, or whatever other online Git repository service you'd like to use, because ideally you want those addresses to match. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press enter there. Now what we do want to do is we want to download the sample Ausimart web code. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to paste in the URL that is provided within the instructions, and then I want to go ahead and press enter. Okay, now if you don't have wget installed on whatever operating system you are using, you can use, whatever you would prefer. If you'd like, you can go ahead and actually open up a browser and download that zip file. All that really matters is that we've got that zip file somewhere and we can work with it. So what I'm going to do now is, now that we've downloaded that, I'm going to browse across to the folder that contains that zip file, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to open it. Now you'll see we've got the Ausimart web application. I'm actually just going to take the branch name off there, so I'll delete -main at the end, and I've got everything that I need now to get started with my local repository. Now I don't actually need this original here. I can always download that again if I want to, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move that to trash. Okay, now before we do get started actually setting up and initializing the repository, what I would say is just make sure that you've got this Ausimart folder within a folder that you would be happy to work within and happy to continue to use as your repository. I've created a very basic lab dev folder, and now within that I've got my Ausimart web folder, and that will become my repository. So I'm going to browse back across to my terminal. I'm going to clear the screen there for better visibility. Okay, and what we want to do now is we want to navigate into that Ausimart folder, and we're going to go ahead and set this up as our local repository. Okay, so we've got everything there ready to go. Let's go ahead and type in git init. Now it is worth mentioning that as you see here, there are some changes to the standards that are used for branch names. And in fact, if you're using GitHub, the branch will commonly be called main by default. So to just make sure that there are no conflicts, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in git branch m, and we'll type in main. Oh, although it'd help if I type that in correctly. Let's try that again, branch m main, and press enter. So that just now means that we've got everything set up, we've got an initialized repository, and it's going to be stored within the main branch. So what we can actually do now is clear the screen, we can take a look and see what has happened. We can type in git status and get a bit more information about our current repository. Now straight away we're going to see that there are some issues. We've got some untracked files because, this folder that we went and initialized already contained a range of different files and folders, and these currently of course haven't yet been staged or committed to our repository. So we've got files within our working directory like we spoke about, but we haven't moved them into staging, and we certainly haven't committed them to the local repository that we just initialized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear that screen, and we'll go ahead, and that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to type in the command git add, and remember that's going to add file or files to our staging area. So just to make things simple, I'll type in --all, And that can make sure that we're getting all of those files within our current working directory added to staging. So if we go git status now, you'll see that we've got a range of different new files that have been recognized. So we can clear the screen once again, and what we actually want to do is we want to commit those changes. So we can simply go ahead, we can type in git commit, and if we want to add in a message, which we will have to do, we can type in -m and add that message in. And let's just say initial setup of repo and press enter. Okay, straight away you'll see that we've actually got all of those files now created within our local repository. So we really have now 3 different areas. We've got our working directory, which we can see here by typing ls and listing all the files. We've also got the git staging area, which is actually now clean. And we've got the local repository, which now contains all of those files within this folder. So if you wanted to make some further changes, what you could do, for example, is browse into the pages folder. We could go in and we could modify the index.cshtml file. So let's do that now with Vim. I'll type in index and we'll make some changes here. And let's just go ahead and, like usual, we'll add in some modifications to the header. We'll type in version 2, ! And I will make those changes. Now what I've just done there is used Vim. If you haven't used Vim before, it's probably best that you use something else like Notepad on your computer to make those changes. And actually, let me quickly just jump back in case you did go there and now you're a little bit stuck. After I made those changes, to actually exit out of Vim, because some people have been stuck there before, you can hold down Shift and press the colon key, and that will allow you to type in commands. You can then type Q and you can type in the ! And that will quit Vim without having made any changes. If you did manage to make some changes that you wanted to save, you can press W for write and also type in Q at the same time, which will save and quit all at once. So that's what I'll do. I'll save and quit, press enter, and now we're back to the terminal. If you did have Visual Studio Code installed, you might actually type in something like this to open up that file within Code. Or what you could in fact do is type in code dot, and that'll open up Visual Studio Code working within this folder. However, I've made those changes and you can go ahead and make those changes however you'd like to do so. And I did that because I wanted to show you what happens after we do make some changes. And now we're kind of out of sync, right? We've made changes in our working directory, but the local repository hasn't been updated. The good thing is if you type in git status, it is aware of that. It knows that you have modified those files. Now you might be modifying some local config file that you're just using for development, and you actually don't want to commit that. That's perfectly okay. But if we did make those changes to that index page and we did want that to be committed, then we know we're going to have to git add, okay, and we can actually just type in that one file by itself, and then we can check git status once again. We can see that it has been added, but it hasn't yet been committed. So let's just clear those details there, and we'll go ahead now and we'll type in git commit once again, and we'll say change to index page and go ahead and press enter. Okay, so there you have it, everybody. You've gone ahead, you've set up a local repository, you've downloaded the Aussie Mart sample web application, you might have even made a change to that application, and you've got it all committed to your local repository. Now we can actually take this local repository and add it to a remote repository, such as Azure DevOps repos or GitHub repos or any other online provider. But for now, that's all we want to do, so that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you soon.